Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 342 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we're sitting at the old, well-worn desk.
We're working on some questions and answers, just like Sam. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I am Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and I am here with the man of the West who couldn't bring himself to write in the Red Book either, Mr. Alan Sisto.
Well, like Frodo said to me, the last pages are for... Well, no, actually, anyone but you, Alan. Yeah. That's what he said. Yeah. Folks, join us as Sam encounters writer's block in our second of two episodes on the unpublished epilogue to The Lord of the Rings.
Well, I'm sure you can't identify at all. Folks, no matter how you got here, you are all welcome here in the common room. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculation.
We do love our deep dives into the lore, discussing our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
Yeah, but we do try to keep things light and fun as my charming voice and slight digs at Alan's age and his digs at my immaturity continue to show. Just like a couple of friends chatting in a pub, we're very glad you've joined us.
And I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well. But before we get to tonight's chapter discussion, Don's asked me to let him take this week's intro segment. Don, why am I suddenly so scared?
Because, Alan, you know something about me that very few people do, and that is I used to be a journalist.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. So when you asked me to come talk about something, I thought, asking questions was literally the only thing I was good at.
I guess I better be ready to answer something. All right.
You better be, because Alan has discovered that in a time that is now faded into legend, I used to be a journalist. I was the Clark Kent at the Daily Planet, the Ori at the Chamber of Mazarbel writing down the attack in Moria, Rita Skeeter if she had a conscience, J. Jonah Jameson, the boss from Spider-Man's newspaper. But I don't yell nearly as much.
Okay, good.
And now, by making a bunch of pop culture references, I have alienated half of the people listening to this.
No, that's fair. We made pop culture references all the time on this show. You know that. But they're just usually like Monty Python and Princess Bride and,
Yes.
Yeah.
You have now gotten to write a book. You have Why We Love Middle-earth, and came out last year. You and Sean, it feels as though it's been a work in progress for many years. It's all sort of been leading up to this. My first question is, why do I not have a signed copy yet?
Oh my goodness, you don't?
I don't.
Okay, then I'm going to remedy that right away. I still have a handful of authors' copies. I'll also get you a code for an audiobook. I think I have a few codes left as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This concludes our interview portion. No, I'm kidding.
Well, we hope we have a long discussion ahead then.
We certainly will. Before we keep going, though, you did mention the audiobook, but I am curious because I believe you are narrating it partially, at least, right?
Actually, completely. That was an interesting story. We obviously, Sean and I wanted to narrate it together, right? We were hoping to sort of like maybe alternate chapters, and then whoever was reading the chapter, the other one of us would read the footnotes, sort of like an insert, like a digression.
Okay. Okay.
But unfortunately, that wasn't able to be done. Our publisher wanted us to do it, but the way the industry works is the publishers contract with a production company that does audiobooks. That's just what they do. And they initially didn't even want either of us to do it based on some pretty decent track records. And that is that typically authors don't do a great job narrating their own audiobooks. Let's just be honest. They're writers, not narrators. And that's fair. That's totally fair. But they did eventually cave and say, all right, you get King Solomon's Choice. You may narrate the audiobook, Alan and Sean, but only one of you. And the problem with that for Sean was because I actually wanted to give it to him, right? I have narrated some audiobooks before. I do voiceover. So I thought, let me give this to Sean. I'd really like him to have that opportunity. But where he lives is half of the country away from the nearest studio. And it is a very time-consuming process. I ended up taking a little less than a full week in the studio. I was there from like 9 to 4 every day for 4.5 days.
Jeez.
But that's only because I'm experienced. I think, having never narrated an audiobook before, Sean might have taken what the producer originally said, which was 6 working days to record it. There's no way he could be gone for more than a week from his day job.
Yeah, that's
travel all the way out here on his own dime. No, not going to happen. So I just went up to Burbank and recorded it over the course of that week. Went back to do pickups, which is just, where they did find that you made some mistakes. There were like 3 or 4 of them. It was, I spent 3 hours on the freeway to do 20 minutes of pickup so I could spend 3 hours on the freeway back.
That's the industry, unfortunately.
That's Burbank for
that
it,
is
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was a really neat opportunity to bring Sean's words to life as well as my own.
Yeah, I was curious. That was actually my follow-up question. How was it narrating stuff that you didn't write? Because obviously the scripts that we have for these episodes, you're doing the bulk of the writing. I'm coming in, adding in my little Gen Z millennial references here and there.
What we've got is more like an outline. If we don't follow what's written, that's totally fine, except for the quoted parts, right? When we're reading a quoted section of text, we want to keep it precise. But after that, it's just, they're more like guidelines than actual rules, and that's totally fine. That's what we want. But in a narrated audiobook, you can't do that. You can't deviate at all. And you have to have strategies for dealing with things like, footnotes and which ones are going to be read out loud and which ones won't, because of course you don't necessarily want to read, like a cited reference only.
Right.
Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Volume 1, page whatever. You're not going to narrate that, but you might narrate a content-based footnote. So we had to kind of go back and forth with the engineer, and I would be like, okay, should we do this? And then we make this change, and everything has to be notated. So it was a very interesting process. But reading Sean's, or narrating Sean's, I should say, was really easy, partly because we wrote it together. I mean, yes, he was responsible for one section of the content, and I was responsible for another section of the content. But we did go into each other's sections and tweak them so that we basically had all of our stuff in our mutual voice, right? So it sounded like us.
A duet, if you will.
Yeah. And yet we did still have individual sections in each chapter that were, like Alan's specific thoughts or Sean's specific thoughts. But it was really nice. It was, it did feel a little weird. Like I wanted desperately for him to be part of it. I really, really did. But yeah, it's too difficult. Production cost wise to have two narrators, and then you've got to have engineers trying to splice all that together, make it sound natural, like you're in the same room. And it just wasn't going to happen.
Oh yeah. Didn't even think about that. Okay. Well, let me ask you this then, because sounding natural is one thing. Did you notice that your writing style, did you gain any extra insight essentially having read it out loud? Because I know we bring it up on this podcast so many times. Reading Tolkien aloud in front of other people changes the way, for me at least, that I see things. Did that happen for you and your own book?
Yeah, a little bit. We discovered that sometimes we have very long sentences with many parenthetical phrases.
Tone it down just a bit.
It was like, okay, take a big breath. Here we go, and then launch into a very long sentence. It was it's like sometimes we write a little bit like we talk, a little rambling. But no, it was really, really fun. It was interesting to see how our words come across in audio form. It felt, because keep in mind, we're taking a podcast and turning it into a book. So we're taking spoken word and turning it into writing in a way. I mean, obviously we were writing a book, but we wanted that tone and that spirit of the podcast. So to turn that into narration again was sort of like translating something from one language into English and then translating it back into that other language again. Yeah, there are going to be some differences, but it's the same thing. And so really that was my approach, was to make it sound like another episode of the podcast.
I love that. And so you can get, how many hours did it turn out?
I think the eventual length of the audiobook was around 11 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's about
so
right.
within that 11 hours, what was the most exciting part of the book that you wrote? Like at the end of the day, you're like, this is the best part of the book. I mean, obviously,
that's tough.
I assume
that is tough, because if I say it's a part of the book that I wrote.
Okay, well, let me split it up here.
Yeah.
What is the favorite part that you wrote, and what is the favorite part that Sean
That's
wrote?
Fair, because I would have had such a hard time figuring that one out. I think with the section that Sean wrote, I really, really enjoyed his take on the extra stuff in the Legendarium. He did a chapter on, obviously we had a chapter on The Hobbit, chapter on The Lord of the Rings, and so on. But he did a really good job of breaking down why these things are important for fans to read, and how you don't have to read everything, but if you're interested, read this, read this, read this. He did a really good job breaking down all of those little extras. So people who are reading the book or listening to the audiobook will have a good, roadmap for what they want to tackle next. I thought that was really insightful, really helpful, and it was a fun piece to read. For me, I really enjoyed reading some of the tongue-in-cheek stuff that I wrote for the adaptation chapters. Probably for me, the piece on the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, specifically on the Balrog. Now, I didn't completely tear up the Bakshi adaptation. It has its really strong moments, and it's really groundbreaking piece. I don't know. That Balrog. That thing.
It's a lot. It's a
That's
lot.
a lot.
If you haven't seen that yet, it's like a fever dream with a sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah.
And then some. It's a lot.
It was interesting. I can't even remember how I described it, but it was funny at the time, and I enjoyed reading it. Narrating it, I should say. But yeah.
How about the most challenging part to get through, whether the audiobook or writing?
Pronunciations always, yes, I know what the general rules are, but sometimes it's so hard to make your mouth make those sounds about the names.
Oh, what? You don't want to pronounce
characters.
Zirag Zigil and Thorin Gwethiel and the Baruch Shakur and
Those were tough things to do. In terms of writing, the toughest thing was actually getting it trimmed down. We do ramble, and
you do. We do. It's Tolkien fans in general.
They originally asked us for 75,000 words, and I'm sort of reminded of Gimli. I asked her for one hair, and she gave me 3. We gave them 105,000 words, and that was only because we trimmed stuff. Like I think I still have about 8,000 words written, and it's maybe only half the chapter on video game adaptations. It's going to be a long chapter. We didn't even include that chapter this time around because there just wasn't room. So I'll finish that chapter for the eventual sequel, and we'll do more there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Final question. Actually, 2 final questions. After writing the book, Why We Love Middle-earth, do you dislike any part of Middle-earth?
Oh, goodness, no. I mean, even the things that I used to dislike, or I should say merely tolerate, right? I mean, my first read-throughs, and even 10 years ago, I would tell you that I wasn't a fan of the poetry. And I've acknowledged this on the show before that, I tended to kind of skip the poetry, especially the silly stuff, and
Yep.
I tell you what, I love it now. And I'm really looking forward to the 3-volume poetry collection that's coming out. I say coming out because we're recording this before its release date. By the time people are hearing this, of course, that volume will have released, and we'll do a Kingly Gift segment on it in a couple of episodes. But I'm excited to see more of that, especially because I'm absolutely in love with alliterative verse now. And so there's nothing I don't like. No.
I love it. All right. Speaking of alliterative verse, we have some verses to get into. I don't know if there's any actual poetry in this
I don't think there
epilogue
is.
part 2.
Nice try, though.
I can think of another segue later.
Swing and a miss. Strike one.
Alan, shall we then begin the discussion from Eleanorella?
I think we should. All right. I'm going to go ahead and read. We're going to skip the first little bit of kind of the explanation of the 2 texts. We're going to pick up with the text itself of the second version of the epilogue. One evening in the March of 1436, Master Samwise Gamgee was in his study at Bag End. He was sitting at the old, well-worn desk, and with many pauses for thought, he was writing in his slow, round hand on sheets of loose paper. Propped up on a stand at his side was a large red book in manuscript. Not long before, he had been reading aloud from it to his family, for the day was a special one, the birthday of his daughter Elanor. That evening before supper, he had come at last to the very end of the book. The long progress through its many chapters, even with omissions that he had thought advisable, had taken some months, for he only read aloud on great days. At the birthday reading, besides Elanor, Frodo lad had been present, and Rosie lass, and young Merry and Pippin. But the other children had not been there. The red book was not for them yet, and they were safely in bed. Goldilocks was only 5 years old, for in this Frodo's foretelling had made a slight error, and she came after Pippin. But she was not the last of the line, for Samwise and Rose seemed likely to rival old Gerontius Duke as successfully in the number of their children as Bilbo had in the number of his years. There was little Ham and Daisy, and there was Primrose still in her cradle. Now Sam was having a bit of quiet. Supper was over. Only Elanor was with him, still up because it was her birthday. She sat without a sound, staring at the fire, and now and again glancing at her father. She was a beautiful girl, more fair of skin than most hobbit maidens, and more slender, and the firelight glinted in her red gold hair. To her, by gift if not by inheritance, a memory of elven grace had descended. "What are you doing, Samdad, dear?" she said at last. "You said you were going to rest, and I hoped you would talk to me." "Just a moment, Eleanorella," said Sam, as she came and set her arms about him and peered over his shoulder. "It looks like questions and answers," she said. "And so it is. said Sam. And that's where we'll stop for the first reading.
So before we get into the reading of this version of the intro, just a quick reminder, this is the version we are going to look at tonight. It superseded the first version we looked at last week. So that is, if Tolkien ever decided to publish the story with an epilogue, it would have been this one. Tolkien first wrote it in what Christopher says is a good, clear manuscript with few corrections, but the second text is a typescript, and that is the one we are looking at tonight.
That's right. So all of those stuff we did last week, that was just prologue. That was just the draft. This is the version that he would have wanted had he chosen to publish it with it. So the date is the same, right? It's an evening of March in 1436. But now, instead of a bunch of kids surrounding Sam, he's by himself. And in another difference that I think is notable, he's not reading aloud from a big red book capitalized, but is instead writing on loose pieces of paper with a large red book not capitalized next to him.
Yeah, so later, though, it is referenced as the red book with the T, the R, and the B capitalized. So can you explain sort of the difference between the two, Alan?
Well, that's the thing. It is weird that he changes it. I think it's still significant. In Interrupted Music, which is the book from Verlin Flieger, she actually notices these differences as well. She writes that two changes from the first to the second version are notable. In the second, Sam is writing, not reading. And I thought that was an interesting point. And then the capitals R and B in Red Book have been replaced by lowercase letters. I feel like what this is doing is putting it more in the context of that frame narrative, right? I mean, we know that the Red Book isn't finished yet, right? Sam has to finish it. Therefore, right now, it's still just a Red Book. And it won't become the Red Book or the Red Book of Westmarch until Sam completes it and until copies are made and Elanor, and it ends up being the history of the actual book.
It has to go through the motions to become what we know it to be now, sort of in the quote unquote modern day of Tolkien.
Right. I mean, it's all sort of that conceit that this book is a translation, that Tolkien is not, coming up with this whole cloth, that he is actually just providing us a translation of the Red Book of Westmarch. So because the Red Book capitalized isn't finished yet, Sam is actually looking at a red book, not capitalized, and not writing in it, but writing on loose leaf pages, as we'll see. It's very interesting. We'll get to that more in a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and instead of reading to the kids, this time he has just finished reading to them on Eleanor's birthday. Nice little detail that has carried over.
Right.
In fact, they've finished reading the book, the process that has taken months of reading on, I assume, very special occasions.
That's the thing. I mean, if you're not reading every night, it's going to take you a while. But frankly, I know from experience that even if you do read every night, it could take you a while.
Yeah. Same energy.
Yeah. And of course, we get the same bit about the mix-up of Frodo's quote-unquote prophecy, as we've talked about before. But Rose and Sam in this version have had one more child, and that's Primrose. And this fits with the family tree that's in Appendix C. So if you look in your volume of The Lord of the Rings, you look at the family tree of Samwise Gardner, right? You look at that long list of names. You'll see that Daisy was born in 1433 and Primrose in 1435, which is the year before we're in this story.
So it's very likely, and I feel like I'm going to be saying this a lot, Rosie is with child
you
again.
Will be saying that's true.
Yeah. Bilbo Gamgee is born in 1436, and it's already March.
Right. So he's going to be born this year. We don't have a birth date. We're never given the actual date, but it is March 25th. So if she's not with child already, she's going to be very, very quickly with child because Bilbo is born, in the next 9 months. Now, it is after the chaos with the kids, and Sam's enjoying some quiet time to himself, and I feel that in my core. I mean, and I only have two, but he's enjoying this quiet time to himself, mostly to himself, because Elanor is still with him, still awake on her birthday.
And in fact, a vast majority of this version of this epilogue is just Sam and his daughter. So there's a short scene at the end with Rose, but that's really it. We do kind of get this similar description of, as Tolkien describes her beauty, as we got in the previous version. We also have a memory of elven grace had descended on her.
I thought that was lovely.
Yeah, it's a nice little descriptor. I like that.
It really does remind us of what we talked about last week, the Fallowhide strain, blessed by Galadriel, and how it shows up more in his kids, but especially in Elanor. With her, though, also, I want to pull this quote from Appendix B, The Tale of Years. She, meaning Elanor, became known as the Fair because of her beauty. Many said that she looked more like an elf maid than a hobbit. She had golden hair, which had been very rare in the Shire. but 2 others of Samwise's daughters were also golden-haired, and so were many of the children born at this time. So clearly, Galadriel's magic really is what influenced this, right? The Fallowhide strain in Sam's family. I love it.
I do kind of love that comes up. It's like, oh, hey, the magic is still kind of there. We see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. Elanor asks Sam what he's doing, hoping that he will talk to her, and calling him, I love this, Sam Dad, which is an interesting way to sort of refer to him. Yeah. Because we see Frodo Lad and Rosie Lass and all of that. So is Sam Dad some sort of what's the significance there?
I don't know. I mean, it is kind of funny. I mean, he says Rose wife or, things like this. And I get it. It's name / position or role. Mm-hmm. But it's weird to have a child call a parent by their first name. It makes me feel, I can't help but think of Bart Simpson calling his dad Homer all the time and driving him nuts.
It might be a little annoying.
It's a little, I'm trying to picture my son saying, Alan Dad. He just calls me Dad. Just call me Dad.
Yeah. Easy enough.
But it is neat. It's just a nice little touch. I think it's maybe a little Hobbit tradition, perhaps. Maybe it's just a way to kind of give us a little closeness, a little demonstration of how the relationship between Sam and Elanor is. It's really neat. I love this relationship, and I love the glimpse we get of this relationship that we'll talk about all throughout this episode.
Yeah.
But just as Sam Dad is an intriguing sort of nickname, or Eleanorella is beautiful, right? It's just a diminutive ending. That ELLE is simply a diminutive. So little Elanor would work, directly. It means the exact same thing, but Eleanorella is so much more aesthetically pleasing. I absolutely adore it.
Spanish languages, and I think some other Romance languages, but I know Spanish specifically, you can add the letters ITA to the end of something. Yeah. So,
or ITO if it's male.
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah. So I would be Danito. So little Don, and you would be Alanito if we wanted to do that. I'm sure there is a much lovelier way of saying it, but
that's hilarious.
Yeah, nice little sort of ending there that Tolkien takes from his philology background.
There you go. I'm only familiar with taquito and burrito and words like that are food related. Yeah.
There's a lot of that there as well.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back. Well, folks, we're going to get back to Sam and Elanor really soon. But before we do, we want to remind you that there is a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
That's right. There are also other people talking. The PPP has an amazing listener community. They are always coming up with some phenomenal questions and lovely discussions and silly memes that I adore for the questions after nightfall. You can check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and so much more.
That's right. Now on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. We're real easy to find. You're going to follow the page to get the news and episode drops, but really you're going to want to join the group to get in some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, you can find us there at r/Prancing Pony Pod. On Twitter and Instagram, we are simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
That's right. And don't forget that my other podcast, the Rings of Power Wrap-Up, is going on right now. Within a day or two of each episode, except for the first one because we were all scattered hither, thither, and yon, but within a day or two of each episode of The Rings of Power released on Amazon Prime Video, I sit down with my co-hosts on that show, Dr. Sarah Brown and James Tauber, and we talk about the characters, story, and lore behind The Rings of Power. And I got to say, I'm looking forward to recording that. I know by the time this comes out, folks, you will have already heard several episodes, I assume, but a little bit more of a lead time, but we are going to be sitting down to record our very first reaction episode in the next couple of days. Should be a lot of fun. You know what else is going to be a lot of fun is listening to you walk through this Q&A. Don?
Dwarves and company. Frodo Lad says he likes them best. What happened to Gimli? Have the mines of Moria been opened again? Are there any orcs left? Answer. Gimli. He came back to work for the king, as he said, and brought many of his folks from the north. And they worked in Gondor so long that they got used to it and settled there, up in the White Mountains not far from the city. Gimli goes once a year to the Glittering Caves. How do I know? Information from Mr. Peregrine, who often goes back to Minas Tirith, where he is very highly thought of. Moria. I have heard no news. Maybe the foretelling about Durin is not for our time. Dark places still need a lot of cleaning up. I guess it will take a lot of trouble and daring deeds yet to root out the evil creatures from the halls of Moria, for there are certainly plenty of orcs left in such places. It is not likely that we shall ever get quite rid of them. Legolas, did he get back to the king? Will he stay there? Yes, he did. He came south with Gimli, and he brought many of his people from Greenwood the Great, so they call it now. They say it was a wonderful sight to see companies of dwarves and elves journeying together. The elves have made the city, and the land where the Prince Faramir lives more beautiful than ever. Yet Legolas will stay there, at any rate, as long as Gimli does. But I think he will go to the sea one day. Mr. Meriadoc told me all this, for he has visited the Lady Eowyn in her white house. Horses. Merry is interested in these, very anxious for a pony of his own. How many horses did the riders lose in the battle? And have they got some more now? What happened to Legolas's horse? What did Gandalf do with Shadowfax? Shadowfax went in the white ship with Gandalf, of course. I saw that myself. I also saw Legolas let his horse run free back to Rohan from Isengard. Mr. Meriadoc says he does not know how many horses were lost, but there are more than ever in Rohan now, because no one steals them any longer. The riders also have many ponies, especially in Harrowdale, white, brown, and gray. Next year, when he comes back from a visit to King Eomer, he means to bring one for his namesake. Ents! Elanor would like to hear more about them. What did Legolas see in Fangorn? And does he ever see Treebeard now? Rosie Lass very anxious about Entwives. Ents! Elanor would like to hear more about them. What did Legolas see in Fangorn? And does he ever see Treebeard now? Rosie Lass very anxious about Entwives. She looks for them whenever she goes in a wood. Will they ever be found? She would like them to be. Legolas and Gimli have not told what they saw, so far as I have heard. I have not heard of anyone that has seen an Ent since those days. Ents are very secret, and they do not like people much, big or little. I should like the Entwives to be found too, but I'm afraid that trouble is too old and too deep for Shire folk to mend. I think maybe Entwives do not want to be found, and maybe the Ents are now tired of looking.
Oh,
how's that for a recap?
Yeah,
that a heartbreaking ending for sure.
And we will get to that. We're going to go back to the beginning of this, though. It's Sam going back to that moment in the Grey Havens. There was a big book with plain red leather covers. Its tall pages were now almost filled. At the beginning, there were many leaves covered with Bilbo's thin, wandering hand. But most of it was written in Frodo's firm, flowing script. It was divided into chapters, but chapter 80 was unfinished. And after that were some blank leaves.
And then after that, we get the list of possible names. Sam exclaims, "Why, you have nearly finished it, Mr. Frodo." Well, you have kept at it, I must say. Frodo's response, "I have quite finished, Sam. The last pages are for you," which I've always thought quite the responsibility for Sam, right? Just sort of having this dumped on him. He's taken the job, very seriously, as one would expect from Sam. So seriously that he has not yet even put his hand to the pages.
15 years, Sam. You haven't actually written in the book. No, I get it. I mean, I'm sure he's terrified to do that. Instead, he's written out this series of questions that you read for us here that Rose and the kids have asked. I mean, it's basically just jotting down notes, right? Rosie worried about Entwives. Elanor wants to know more about Ents. Mary wants to know about horses. So he's writing out this series of questions. And of course, a lot of them are Eleanor's questions since she's the only one who's heard the story more than once. The questions are very similar to the ones we saw in the first version, but there are new additions to the answers, aren't there?
There are, and I love that we get these. So with the dwarves, we learned that the information on Gimli and his people came through Pippin. Right. More importantly, we actually get something on Moria, untouched in that previous version of the epilogue. So Sam acknowledges that perhaps the prophecy of Durin's return isn't quite for this time.
That's right. Now think back to A Journey in the Dark in The Lord of the Rings when Gimli sang of Durin's halls. The last stanza of that verse was, "But still the sunken stars appear in dark and windless Miramir. There lies his crown in water deep till Durin wakes again from sleep." Now Sam was so moved by that whole poem that he said, I should like to learn it. And I can't help but wonder, maybe he did, right? I mean, he's thinking about Durin's prophecy. Yeah. He loves his songs, his poetry, doesn't he?
He does. He does. Or potentially after the company has journeyed through Moria, when they look into that mirror itself, that's the "O Keled Zarum, fair and wonderful," said Gimli. "There lies the crown of Durin till he wakes. Farewell." He bowed and turned away and hastened back up the greensward to the road again. "What did you see?" said Pippin to Sam. But Sam was too deep in thought to answer. So while Sam is still, likely thinking about Moria when he says, dark places still need a lot of cleaning up, I think he's certainly right about that in general, for sure.
He is. And I also love the moment that you pointed out there. Sam was too deep in thought to answer. I feel like he really did feel an affinity toward the dwarves at that moment. And so I think for him, he is very cognizant of the prophecy about Durin, right? The return that he will make till Durin wakes again from sleep. And we'll cover this more later this season when we talk about the dwarves. But of course, as a recap, the dwarves do believe that Durin it's not really reincarnation. They actually believe he comes back, that his spirit inhabits the bodies of Durin, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down to the seventh. And so that's this notion that Durin, the father of the Longbeards, will come back. So yeah, it may not be for now, as we'll see. But you were right about dark places needing cleaning up. There are plenty of orcs still around, as Sam says. It's likely, honestly, to be a permanent concern. And I want to touch on that a little bit. Like, I don't think there's any way of putting that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're getting rid of all of the orcs. It's a little bit like, you remember when the vaccine first came out and COVID was like, we can get rid of it, just like that Ebola scare a few years before. And now it's just sort of staying here. It feels as though
it's
Tolkien
endemic
is
now
sort of
instead
saying,
of pandemic.
Yeah. It's here. We're dealing with it as best we can. Fight the orcs when you need to. They're probably always going to be around.
So then we get some more detail on Legolas as well. It's not just that he's in Ithilien with some of the elves of Greenwood, but that he and his people traveled south with Gimli and his people, as Sam says, a wonderful sight of unity between these peoples. That's amazing. It isn't just Gimli and Legolas who are friends. They're leading their peoples down together. That must have been fantastic.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that was like. I love that they included that. And I love the source that it comes from. And it's just Pippin. Pippin providing information on the dwarves and Merry giving information on Legolas and Ithilien. Like, by the way, our friends that were like the super adventurous hyper ones, they're great. They're off doing their own thing.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the horse stuff, of course, is very similar to the earlier version, but with the addition of a few details, right? Notably, Sam says that he himself saw Gandalf take Shadowfax, as he would have, right? I mean, he was there, so he would be the best eyewitness. Merry and Pippin would have seen it as well. And he also was there when he saw Legolas releasing his horse. So here we get another providing of the source. And that's something that we see more in this version than in the first version. But also, and what would be great news for Sam's son had he heard it, Mary's going to bring back a pony for him.
What a good little tidbit to include. It's like, by the way, Uncle Mary's got a surprise for you. It's so great.
And Pippin's like, man, that ain't cool. I need a horse. Yeah.
All right, we get a little bit more from the Ents. More tiny bits keep coming in here. So at first it's, an old trouble and it's too hard for hobbits to fix. And then later in the manuscript, he adds that they are very close, very secret-like, and they don't like people very much.
That's right. I decided that Ents were my kind of people because of that. Yeah. But then we get the sorrowful observation in that later manuscript that maybe the Entwives don't want to be found. And now, as we talked about at the end, it hits hard. Maybe Ents are now tired of looking. Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I guess some rifts just get to be too much.
It feels as though we've got some sort of divorced parents who have maybe lost touch. They didn't have any kids, even though technically they take care of the Huorns. Just keep going with this analogy. I'm building it as I go.
Because you just called them divorced parents. So I was just a little lost.
It's so maybe we do a divorced couple.
There you go. Maybe they had a cat
the analogy
or something.
You know what? That's probably what happened.
It's not a human child or anything that important.
No.
But.
You know what? Maybe the rift happened when one of them let the cat out and the cat didn't come back. It went off on its own. Maybe one of the cats of Queen Baruthiel. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. We are really going far afield with this one. Go for it. I'm ready to ride this through. Go for it.
All right. The Ents don't want to look for the Entwives because they just forgot what they fought about all those many years ago. And the Endwives are like, I don't care. He's just Treebeard's too much. He's doing too much. We don't get along anymore. And they're basically just like the divorced couple.
It takes too long to talk about what's for dinner. What do you want to eat tonight? Well, I don't know.
That's a good Treebeard. Oh my God.
What do you like to eat tonight, dear?
Incredible. Alan will now be doing the entirety of the rest of the readings in Treebeard's voice.
Okay, then the episode's going to be 3 hours long. That's the problem. Yeah. We really actually struggled when we did the Treebeard chapter because we did that. We did our voices. Oh, God. And then I had Jordan add some really cool sound effects. We did like creaking bark and
nice.
It was really a fun run of episodes there. But it did make the dialogue really long, or the reading sections really long, because he does speak so slowly. Which is funny, because if you actually ever hear Tolkien read Treebeard's dialogue, which you can if you get the J.R.R. Tolkien audio collection, there's a link for it in our library pages, he actually reads it relatively quickly. He does not read it slow. I just couldn't help myself. And I wasn't trying to emulate John Rhys Davies doing Treebeard's voice in the films, but I did sort of go with that very laborious pace of talking intentionally, because that felt right. Fun stuff. All right. I will not be reading the next passage in Treebeard's voice, but I will be reading the next passage.
I love it. Carry on.
Well, dear, said Sam, this top page, this is only today's batch. He sighed. It isn't fit to go in the book like that. It isn't a bit like the story as Mr. Frodo wrote it, but I shall have to make a chapter or two in proper style somehow. Mr. Meriadoc might help me. He's clever at writing, and he's making a splendid book all about plants. Don't write any more tonight. Talk to me, Samdad, said Elanor, and drew him to a seat by the fire. Tell me, she said, as they sat close together with the soft golden light on their faces. Tell me about Lorien. Does my flower grow there still, Samdad? Well, dear, Celeborn still lives there among his trees and his elves, and there I don't doubt your flower grows still. Though now I have got you to look at, I don't hanker after it so much. But I don't want to look at myself, Samdad. I want to look at other things. I want to see the hill of Amroth where the king met Arwen, and the silver trees, and the little white Nifredil, and the golden Elanor in the grass that is always green. And I want to hear elves singing. Then maybe you will one day, Elanor. I said the same when I was your age and long after it, and there didn't seem to be no hope. And yet I saw them, and I heard them. I was afraid they were all sailing away, Samdad. Then soon there would be none here. And then everywhere would be just places and what, Eleanorella? And the light would have faded. I know, said Sam. The light is fading, Eleanorella. But it won't go out yet. It won't ever go quite out, I think now, since I have had you to talk to. For it seems to me now that people can remember it who have never seen it. And yet, he sighed, even that is not the same as really seeing it like I did. Like really being in a story, said Elanor. A story is quite different, even when it is about what happened. I wish I could go back to old days. Folk of our sort often wish that, said Sam. You came at the end of a great age, Eleanorella. But though it's over, as we say, things don't really end sharp like that. It's more like a winter sunset. The high elves have nearly all gone now with Elrond, but not quite all, and those that didn't go will wait now for a while. And the others, the ones that belong here, will last even longer. There are still things for you to see, and maybe you'll see them sooner than you hope.
I love that idea of Elanor getting her own little adventure to go on in the Fourth Age. I think that's just going to be so cool.
I know, I do too. It's so neat.
Yeah.
It's great. What a sweet moment this really is with the two of them.
Yeah. I love this. This part of the trilogy holds a very special place in my heart. And as it turns out, these Q&As that Sam has been working on are just today's batch.
I know, man.
Sure does make me want to wonder what other pages he's working on.
Like, hey, I want to see all of that stuff now.
Did you go back and see Tom Bombadil? What's up with that dude? Come on,
please
man.
Explain Tom. He's got like 6 pages of, I don't know. I mean, really, he's just this guy, you know?
He is. And there is no way that he could slot in questions and answers in the book. He knows he has to write it like Frodo did in a, quote, proper style.
Yeah, exactly. In proper style. He can't just slot in an FAQ at the end of the book.
Nah.
Now, earlier we mentioned Verlin Flieger, and she talked about, the sort of the frame narrative idea here. She has something very interesting to say about this in Interrupted Music, where she points out that this version we've looked at today shows Sam struggling with his job of finishing the book. Specifically, that bit that she mentioned about Sam saying that he has to make a chapter or two in proper style somehow. Now, Dr. Flieger suggests the allusion to proper style takes account of disparities between Sam's mode of expression and Frodo's, which would, of course, have resulted in a marked difference in who wrote which sections of the text. A solution would have involved considerable rewriting of a book almost completed. She ends up arguing that it was actually wise of Tolkien to allow himself to be persuaded to omit the epilogue from The Lord of the Rings as published. Talk about that a little bit with me. I see what she's saying. The idea is, how does Tolkien, as the author of the actual book, reconcile the writing style differences between Frodo and Sam? If Sam is alleged to have written the last bit, what does that look like in the form of the book? Is that so complicated that you're basically rewriting the entire thing?
Don't rewrite the entirety of The Lord of the Rings. Don't rewrite the entire, there's a world that exists where all of those decades ago, something came out of this epilogue that completely changes how we view The Lord of the Rings. I'm always so curious about alternate histories, as I've said oftentimes before. Yeah. I can't imagine it, because it almost feels a little bit like, those people that try and do the sequel 30 years later, but it's a little bit different, or it's a different style, or the times have changed too much. Mm-hmm. I almost get the sense that if he had tried to do something different or completely change it or rewrite something, it feels like something else would have been missed. And the book itself wouldn't have hit as hard as it did, as passionately as it did. I don't know.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, remember, he did actually start a rewrite of The Hobbit to be in that more serious tone of The Lord of the Rings. And he abandoned it because it just wasn't going to work. And I think it's the same sort of thing here. You're right. Going back and changing it, he would not have been able to rewrite the entire thing to accommodate for that. And, we talked about this a little bit last week about our own opinions regarding the inclusion of the epilogue. I sort of really do lean towards what Flieger concludes here, that it was actually the wise decision to allow himself to be persuaded to omit it as published. I am so glad that we have it now, right? That those of us who like the deep dives can look at it, can get this taste of what Sam and Eleanor's relationship was like as she was a young woman. So we can sort of see her role in giving us this book, right? I mean, she ends up playing a very, very important role in us reading this book down the road. So it's nice to see that. But I don't know that it would have fit, and it would have been really weird to try to reconcile Frodo's writing and Sam's writing.
Yeah. Speaking of the writing, back into the text, writing isn't Sam's forte, so he's thinking of having Merry help him a little bit. This is the larger Merry, not his 9-year-old son.
Oh, that would be funny.
Yeah, right. I would have loved to see how that turned out. But we also learn that Merry is writing a book on plants, and that would be Herblore of the Shire. We read about this in the portion of the prologue concerning pipeweed, where, as we read, all that could be discovered about pipeweed in antiquity was put together by Meriadoc Brandybuck, later Master of Buckland, and since he and the tobacco of the South Farthing play a part in the history that follows, his remarks in the introduction to his Herblore of the Shire may be quoted.
And what you're going to do right now, aren't you? You're going to quote some of that.
Yes, I am going to do it right now. Let's do it.
I love it. Herblore is a great thing to read. Yes.
This, he says, is the one art that we can certainly claim to be our own invention. When hobbits first began to smoke, it is not known. All the legends and family histories take it for granted. For ages, folk in the Shire smoked various herbs, some fouler, some sweeter, but all accounts agree that Tobold Hornblower of Longbottom in the South Farthing first grew the true pipeweed in his garden in the days of Isengrim II, about the year 1070 of Shire reckoning. Of course, he goes on, but the point is clear that Meriadoc Brandybuck can turn plain fact into a story. So Sam is going to see if he can get some help for all of this Red Book stuff.
That's right. Now, this wasn't Mary's only book either. We don't get to read the others, unfortunately. Boy, that'd be so nice to do that. But we do have their names given to us later in the prologue, and here's that part. Since Meriadoc and Peregrine became the heads of their great families, and at the same time kept up their connections with Rohan and Gondor. The libraries at Bucklebury and Tuckborough contained much that did not appear in the Red Book. In Brandy Hall, there were many works dealing with Eriador and the history of Rohan. Some of these were composed or begun by Meriadoc himself, though in the Shire he was chiefly remembered for his Herblore of the Shire and for his Reckoning of Years, in which he discussed the relation of the calendars of the Shire and Bree to those of Rivendell, Gondor, and Rohan. He also wrote a short treatise on old words and names in the Shire, showing special interest in discovering the kinship with the language of the Rohirrim of such Shire words as Matham and old elements in place names. I want to read that now. I mean, total word nerdery, Mary diving into that connection. And we've explored that some last season of the PPP. Really, really interesting how Tolkien connected those. I mean, that was the whole idea behind Tolkien using Old English for the Rohirrim, was to explain why it was sort of the illustrative way of demonstrating the connection between Old English and modern English. And in the same way, showing that Rohirric eventually became Westron, right? That there are elements in Westron that trace their origins back to the Rohirrim and their early language. So great stuff.
Tolkien was really good at language stuff.
Really,
he should become
really
a philologist or something.
Yeah. That's the thing. Even if he'd never written any of this, he would still be known in academic circles as this amazing philologist and Beowulf scholar. I mean, he'd absolutely, no doubt his standing would have been high, but yeah, I'm certainly grateful he wrote this. Here's the thing about Mary. I mean, we're not saying that Sam's part of the Red Book was ghost written by Meriadoc Brandy book, but I'm also not saying that it isn't. It would make for an interesting story that really it's Sam wrote it, but no, really, it was actually Mary who wrote the last part of the Red Book.
It's a whole thing. It's just, hey, the last few pages are for you. Mary doesn't really hit the same, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's fair.
Oh, boy. All right. Elanor wants to spend a little bit more time with her father, though, and asks him to stop writing and talk with her instead. This is where we get some of that same conversation element that we talked about last week, that we read, starting with her asking about the flower, Elanor, that grows at Ciaran Amroth in Lothlorien.
That's right. And that, of course, brings us back to Celeborn again, as Sam imagines the flower still grows there, in part because Celeborn and the elves still live there. And then Sam, sort of like he did in the previous version when he talks about looking in a mirror, he compliments Elanor, saying, I don't need to see the flower now. I don't have a hankering for it anymore now that I have you. She's not hearing it. She's like, nope. That is not relevant to me, Dad. Thank you. I want to see these things for myself. I want to hear the elves singing.
Yeah. And I mean, who doesn't?
Well,
really?
It's just like Sam, right? I mean, that she's very much like father, like daughter here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Also, like in the previous version, Sam encourages her by relating his own story.
I wanted to see them for decades, and finally it showed up. Yeah.
Finally I did. However, unlike then, it appears the elves are leaving, and it feels definitely like Elanor is concerned about that. Like last week, the fears are sort of places becoming merely places, that light fading, the elves going away. And we get a really pretty thought here about people can remember the light who have never seen it, even though that's nowhere near the same.
No, it isn't. But wow, what a truth that is.
Great
People can remember it who've never seen it.
Yeah.
I think even of the Tolkien fandom and all the things that we have studied and learned and know, we weren't part of the writing process. We never met Tolkien. I mean, I suppose actually there probably are some fans who did, but unlikely, not very many. And we can't remember him directly because we've never seen him, but we can still remember him. And it's sort of the same way. Like people can remember the light even if they've never seen it. So, of course, really seeing it is like really being in a story. So it is very different. It's not quite the same. And that's something that Elanor would have been hearing about all her life, thinking about being in a story. I mean, I go back to Sam's own words on the stairs of Cirith Ungol as he's sort of talking to Frodo about their next steps. He says, Baron now. He never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown in Thangorodrim, and yet he did, and that was a worse place and a blacker danger than ours. But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness and into grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Eärendil. And why, sir, I never thought of that before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales never end? I love that. Absolutely love that. It's we are in that same exact story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really are. And I love that because, and Elanor is romanticizing, the quote, old days, wanting to go back to those stories. But Sam, who has experienced all of that and gone through the hardship and the trauma, explains it doesn't really work that way. There is not a then and a now. Things don't really end sharp like that. That's what he says. And I just, it's a microcosm of like this idea that I think we're experiencing now in modern media of like, yeah, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to keep going after Iron Man, and there are going to be reboots and retellings of the tale. Like, it doesn't ever end. And one of them is for capitalism reasons.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, why would you stop printing money when you can just print more money?
Exactly. But to that end, right, we're literally living that in real time now.
Things don't really end sharp like that.
They don't.
Yeah, no. And I love the analogy that Sam uses here. It's a beautiful analogy, the winter sunset. Now, if you live closer to the equator like I do, right, I'm in Southern California, you might not understand this quite as readily. But if you're in a northern latitude like the Shire, sunset during winter is longer. It's extended, and it wouldn't have a necessarily clearly defined moment. The sun is going to be coming down at a shallower angle. It's going to take longer to go below the horizon. And there's not necessarily as clearly defined a moment of, oop, now it's light, oop, now it's dark. Dusk goes a long time before it actually becomes dark.
As with most things, it is a spectrum, and it's basically the same as in the previous version. Most of the elves have gone, but not all of them, and those that remain will stay for a while.
It's interesting, though, that Sam mentions the ones that belong here. So I think he's talking about the Sindar and the Nandor, and of course the Avari as well, right? He's talking about those elves who never even began the journey. That would be the Avari, or the ones who did begin the journey, but who stopped very early on. So
yeah, you know who else should stay here, though?
Who's that?
The folks listening to this podcast as we go into our second ad break.
Nicely played. Folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the PPP by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. Now, it's what gives me the ability to work on making this show better every year, bringing in folks to fill those impossible shoes of Sean's. I have to pay them to do that because, man, who wants to try to tackle that job, right, Don?
I mean, look, no joke. The first time you invited me on, I sent, this is a joke, right? Like, this is Sean. Like, what? They are big shoes to fill, but I've been very fortunate for the support, and it is great to come back.
It is great to have you back too. And Matt and Sarah and James and everybody that's been coming back. It's been fantastic. But folks, obviously your help is what enables me to do that. And when you join, you get the best Discord community around, as Don will attest. That includes live episode recordings and hangouts every month. You also get episode postscripts. With Don, I suspect it's going to be a lot of what if in Middle Earth because we do love doing that. You can get ad-free episodes, free merch, and more.
You can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
Now, of course, you can always help us out as well by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, a rating on Spotify, or just sharing us with your friends. In the meantime, Don, I would love to have you pick up the next section of the text.
I would absolutely love to, because it starts with Elanor being a little bit quiet and then immediately speaking again.
Of course,
we are perfectly on brand.
That's right.
Elanor was silent for some time before she spoke again. I did not understand at first what Celeborn meant when he said goodbye to the king, she said. But I think I do now. He knew that Lady Arwen would stay, but that Galadriel would leave him. I think it was very sad for him, and for you, dear Sam Dad. Her hand felt for his, and his brown hand clasped her slender fingers. For your treasure went too. I am glad Frodo of the Ring saw me, but I wish I could remember seeing him. Just Don interrupting here.
Yeah.
What a line.
Isn't
from
it?
A kid.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, breaks my heart and warms it at the same time.
Yes. Oh.
And then perhaps Sam saying it is even sadder.
Yep.
It was sad, Eleanorella, said Sam, kissing her hair. It was, but it isn't now. For why? Well, for one thing, Mr. Frodo has gone where the elven light isn't fading, and he deserves his reward. But I have had mine too. I have had lots of treasures. I am a very rich hobbit. And there is one other reason, which I shall whisper to you, a secret I have never told before to no one, nor put in the book yet. Before he went, Mr. Frodo said that my time maybe would come. I can wait. I think maybe we haven't said farewell for good. But I can wait. I have learned that much from the elves at any rate. They are not so troubled about time. And so I think Celeborn is still happy among his trees, in an elvish way. His time hasn't come, and he isn't tired of his land yet. When he is tired, he can go. And when you're tired, you will go, Sam, Dad. You will go to the havens with the elves. Then I shall go with you. I shall not part with you, like Arwen did with Elrond. Maybe, said Sam, kissing her gently. And maybe not. The choice of Luthien and Arwen comes to many, Eleanorella. Or something like it. And it isn't wise to choose before the time. And now, my dearest, I think that it's time even a lass of 15 springtimes should go to her bed. And I have words to say to Mother Rose. Elanor stood up and passed her hand lightly through Sam's curling brown hair, already flecked with gray. Good night, Sam, Dad. But I don't want good night, said Sam. But won't you show it me first? I was going to say. Show you what, dear? The king's letter, of course. You have had it now more than a week.
Oh, my. All right, Elanor, troublemaker. Oh, man. So we start this next section with an unexpected answer to a question that we've had for a while. Back in episode 327, James and I were talking about that farewell that Celeborn gave to Aragorn in many partings. He said, "Kinsman, farewell. May your doom be other than mine, and your treasure remain with you to the end."
That hits hard.
Doesn't it?
Not surprisingly, yeah. You noted the obvious meaning that Galadriel is his own sort of treasure and that Arwen is Aragorn's treasure, and may Arwen remain with you to the end, Aragorn, because my treasure is about to take the next boat out of here. So bye-bye.
Yes,
and then, of course,
nice. Yep. Thanks for hanging out. Catch you in Valinor. Yeah.
Bye. It's been so much fun here. Thank you for letting me hang out. I'm going to go back.
It's been thousands of years, but I do want to go back to Valinor now.
And Elanor confirms this. At least she had the same thought that we had here regarding Celeborn's farewell, noting that Celeborn was sad. It was very sad for him.
Of course it was. I mean, despite Sam talking about Celeborn being happy in his land with his trees, it's not going to be for long. I mean, the Tale of Years tells us that after the passing of Galadriel, in a few years, Celeborn grew weary of his realm and went to Imladris to dwell with the sons of Elrond. Of course, those would be his grandsons. And then it also tells us that there is no record of the day when at last he sought the Grey Havens.
And it is interesting, though, that he grew weary of his realm. Yeah. This is sort of matching what Sam said last week. When he tires of it, he can leave. And what he says shortly is, and when he tires of it, he can go.
Right. But the killer observation made by Elanor is what she says next. And man, this just hits so hard. She compares the departure of Celeborn's treasure, Galadriel, to the departure of Sam's treasure in Frodo.
And then this heartbreaking line.
Yes.
Love that. Is followed by the way, I don't remember meeting him because, of course, Frodo sailed west in the Third Age, 3021. Elanor had only been born in March of that year, so she's still very young. But, how sad. Yeah. How sad is that?
That is deeply sad. Now, this observation about Frodo being Sam's treasure, not to mention, the fact that she wished she could remember him, really does seem to touch Sam, right? He kisses her hair. He admits that while it was sad, this is interesting, it is no longer sad. And that's because not only has Frodo gotten his reward, right, the non-fading elven light, but so has Sam. He has lots of treasures, Rose and their kids, not necessarily wealth. I mean, he does say he's a rich hobbit. He's talking about family. But let's be honest, he is the heir of Frodo, so he's probably materially well off too.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
He's doing all
right.
Yeah, I'm sure the mayor is, taken care of. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So there is one other reason that Sam isn't sad, and while he hasn't put this in the Red Book, Frodo told Sam that his own time might come.
Yes.
So even now, 15 years after the trilogy has ended, he believes that they haven't said goodbye for the last time.
That's right. And twice he says in this passage that he can wait. I mean, right next to each other practically. And he's reminding us that he's learned that patience from the elves who, because of their immortality / serial longevity, view time differently. We get that Celeborn reference again, but this time with a twist. Not just that Celeborn will go when he is tired, but according to Elanor, Sam will go when he is tired.
Seems to be a pretty solid choice for a lot of characters here, like knowing when their time has come. Aragorn has it, Arwen has it, Celeborn, and now here we go, Sam. So it has, Elanor says she'll go with him, not parting from him like Arwen and Elrond. And this has gotten her... it's got an idea it's really gotten to her. She feels very deeply about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt. She loves her father, and she's like, I can't imagine being separated from you,
Yeah.
So if you go, I'm going to go. And Sam, he doesn't want to break her heart. He doesn't want to say, no, you can't. He says, maybe not. Then he says something here that I want us to take a few minutes and look at. He says, the choice of Luthien and Arwen comes to many, or something like it. What do you think he means? I mean, I can't honestly think he means the literal choice of Luthien and Arwen comes to many, because that choice only came to the two of them. The choice to give up their mortality. I'm sorry, to give up their immortality in exchange for, loving a mortal. But what does he mean by that choice or something like it comes to many?
So it feels as though there are many defining choices within the Lord of the Rings. So for me, I sort of read it as there is this choice that people have to make. And it's the very important choice. It's, will Arwen stay with Aragorn? Will Aragorn choose to become king? Will Legolas and Gimli put aside their differences and become, for all of these sort of character arcs that we're looking at, they come at a very specific moment. And I think the implication here, for me at least, is that Sam says, all right, Elanor, you've made up your mind, but don't think that your mind is made up when you get to that point, because Sam wanted to kill Gollum and probably would have, but when the time came, he didn't. Frodo very much wanted to put the ring into the fire, and when the time came, he couldn't. But Arwen stays true. There are these moments and decisions that I think people make within Tolkien throughout the Legendarium that lead to something like this, but you can't know how it's going to go until the things you've experienced, until you're in it, until you're there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that's kind of the right track to go down. The choice of Luthien or Arwen comes to many, or something like it. I think we're talking about maybe those irreversible decisions, the ideas to, if you're going to be faced with a decision that will change everything for you, right? Frodo's decision in Rivendell to take the ring. He didn't know that going into the Council of Elrond. He didn't know that he was going to volunteer to do that. Knowing ahead of time, you can't make that decision until that decision is upon you. And I think that's what he's trying to say here. And those decisions to choose a fate, to decide to do this thing that's irreversible or that's going to change everything going forward, is something you can't make until that moment is there. So.
Yeah. I often equate it to something like Aragorn, knowing that it is his time to step down as king and pass away and join the halls of his fathers. Very similar vibes of like, look, I'm here. I have been thinking about this moment for quite a while. We can't go back after we make this decision.
No, it's irreversible. That's for sure.
Things are going to change, but I am in the moment now, and you either, stay true or have a change of heart. And Samwise Gamgee making that choice, Elanor making that choice, it's something that you can't do until you're there. You have to. Yeah. It's one of those you have to be there moments.
Yeah, no, you're right. Don't cross the bridges that you haven't gotten to yet. Yeah. Well, this whole thing, this discussion brings me to an essay that I've had a chance to read between recording these two episodes, right? Our first one on the epilogue last week and this one. Nicole Duplessis wrote an article. It's called Changed Utterly, The Implications of Tolkien's Rejected Epilogue to The Lord of the Rings. It can be found in Tolkien Studies Volume 15, and I want to bring in some of what she says here. In speaking about these two ideas, both Sam being reunited with Frodo and Elanor wanting to go with him, she writes this: unlike The Return of the King, which closes with unity and wholeness in marriage and family, the epilogue introduces the idea of a bond that is beyond marriage, which she argues, and I have to say quite rightly, is a unique vision in a work that emphasizes the unity of Beren and Luthien, voices the belief that the Ents and the Entwives lost to one another will be reunited in an afterlife, and mourns the separation of Galadriel and Celeborn, Arwen and Aragorn.
And at one point, she does say that after Rosie dies, Sam's path diverges from marriage and family as he potentially rejoins Frodo, the master whom he loves. And while he departs after Rosie's death, not leaving her while she is alive, Sam will leave behind his daughter Elanor, as Elrond must leave Arwen.
Mm-hmm.
The sorrow that Elanor anticipates is perhaps more natural, a part of growing up, but it is a sorrow to her nonetheless, and she stubbornly rejects it, saying, "Then I shall go with you. I shall not part with you like Arwen did to Elrond, and I will bring you back," to the Peter Jackson trilogy that says, "I'm going to Mordor alone. Of course you are, and I'm going with you." Come on. That is, but then at the end, Sam lets Frodo go.
Yeah.
At the end of the, like, there's so many parallels between this relationship and the Frodo Sam one that I absolutely love. I think I almost wish that instead of A New Shadow, Tolkien had written something about Elanor and her adventures.
I know.
That just seems like maybe that's my next fan fiction thing. Maybe that's what I write.
Maybe it is an interesting comparison. I honestly had not thought of that really before. You know, when Sam leaves to go to Valinor, I knew it was after Rose had died. I didn't even honestly think about his kids, but that's pretty significant. You know, I mean, he's immortal. This is not quite like Elrond and Arwen in the sense that they don't ever have to be apart. You know, they can be together forever. You know, if she chose immortality, they go to Valinor together and are reunited with Celebrian. But Sam is immortal and will eventually die. You know, his body will die. His Fea, his spirit will depart for wherever Mandos says the spirits of hobbits go. But they're very short roofs in the short ceilings in the halls of Mandos for the Hobbit halls now. So it was really just accelerating the inevitable in that sense, right? I mean, Sam leaving for Valinor was just, you know, doing what was going to be done anyway. So like Duplessis says here, the sorrow that Elanor anticipates is perhaps more natural. It is a part of growing up as a mortal that, you know, Arwen and Elrond would not have normally had. But it is still a sorrow. And she says, no, I'm going to go with you. I love the way that Duplessis wraps this part up. She writes that in a body of work replete with fathers and sons, and she's absolutely right. I mean, you think about all the father-son relationships or the sort of parallel father-son relationships. I mean, I'm thinking Theoden and Éomer. It's not father-son, but it might as well be. Certainly Denethor Boromir, Denethor Faramir. There are plenty of others. Aragorn always defines himself as Aragorn Arathorn's son, you know.
Yeah, we don't even know Legolas's mother's name.
No, we don't.
We don't even get that.
I mean, everything's a patronymic, right? I mean, that's just how it works. So like she says, in a body of work replete with fathers and sons, the anticipated parting emphasizes the tenderness of this rare father-daughter relationship. Absolutely true. If there is something that I could have gotten in addition to The Lord of the Rings, it would have been something about Elanor and her relationship with Sam.
Yeah.
Given that Tolkien had 3 sons and 1 daughter, I also can't help wondering how much of this might have been personal for him. I don't want to speculate about his relationship with Priscilla, but
No. But there's certainly, you draw from what you know, and him being a father, look, I don't have kids, but the way he writes this is so sweet. I want Tolkien to be my dad sometimes. Like,
have you read the Father Christmas stories? Yeah, the Father Christmas tales. Man, this guy made for a great dad. He was phenomenal.
Yeah. You got to wonder, like, what kind of dad was this dude? And I get the sense, especially, you know, that this is really important to Tolkien as a writer, as it is important to Sam. And even their goodbye, even sending her to bed, because he sends Elanor to bed saying he wants to spend some time with Rose.
Yeah, I got words from Mother Rose.
Yeah. So she initially goes up to say goodnight and then adds in the but. Yeah. And Tolkien very easily could have said, no ifs, ands, or buts, you get to bed. But no, Sam is very kind. He's gentle to his kids. She wants to see the king's letter. Yes. He's had it for a week, and there's this playfulness between the two. Yeah, and I love that so much.
It really is, yeah.
Alan, would you kindly bring us into the next portion?
I certainly would. Sam sat up. Good gracious, he said. How stories do repeat themselves, and you get paid back in your own coin and all. How we spied on poor Mr. Frodo, and now our own spy on us, meaning no more harm than we did, I hope. But how do you know about it? There was no need for spying, said Elanor. If you wanted it kept secret, you were not nearly careful enough. It came by the South Farthing Post early on Wednesday last week. I saw you take it in, all wrapped in white silk and sealed with great black seals. Anyone who had heard the book would have guessed at once that it came from the king. Is it good news? Won't you show it me, Samdad? Well, as you're so deep in, you'd better be right in, said Sam. But no conspiracies now. If I show you, you join the grown-up side and must play fair. I'll tell the others in my own time. The king is coming. He's coming here, Elanor cried. To Bag End? No, dear, said Sam, but he's coming north again, as he hasn't done since he was a mite. But now his house is ready. He won't come into the Shire because he's given orders that no big folk are to enter the land again after those ruffians, and he won't break his own rules. But he will ride to the bridge, and he sent a very special invitation to every one of us, everyone by name. Sam went to a drawer, unlocked it, and took out a scroll and slipped off its case. It was written in 2 columns with fair silver letters upon black. He unrolled it and set a candle beside it on the desk so that Elanor could see it. How splendid, she cried. I can read the plain language, but what does the other side say? I think it is Elvish, but you've taught me so few Elvish words yet. Yes, it's written in a kind of Elvish that the great folk of Gondor use, said Sam. I've made it out, enough at least to be sure that it says much the same, only it turns all our names into Elvish. Yours is the same on both sides, Elanor, because your name is Elvish. But Frodo is Yorhild, and Rose is Merrill, and Merry is Gellier, and Pippin is Cordolf, and Goldilocks is Glorfiniel, and Hamfast is Baravorn, and Daisy is Arion. So now you know. How wonderful, she said. Now we have all got Elvish names. What a splendid end to my birthday. But what is your name, Samdad? You didn't mention it. Well, it's rather peculiar, said Sam. For in the Elvish part, if you must know, the king says Master Perhyle, who should be called Pantile. And that means Samwise, who ought to be called Fullwise. So, now you know what the king thinks of your old father. Love it. I love this scroll. Yeah.
This is a good one. This is a really good one. And I like how he incorporates the Elvish language sort of thing from the first part, as he immediately is reminded of the conspiracy that he and his friends committed against Frodo back in the day, back in Conspiracy Unmasked.
That was a great chapter. What goes around comes around, apparently, for Sam. I love that phrase, you get paid back in your own coin. It's just so it feels hobbity, doesn't it? It does.
It does, especially because when you think about it, the only time we see hobbit coins are when they buy Bill the pony. And boy, doesn't that come back to help them out
later.
Sure
does. That's a good point.
And also Bill gets kicked in the face, so he's getting paid back for his cruelty as well.
Yes, Bill Fernie, not Bill the pony.
Bill Fernie. Yes, Bill the pony is a lovely horse.
He doesn't get kicked in the face. He did almost get eaten by a watcher in the water, but no,
thank goodness he didn't.
That's right. So then Sam asks how she knew about the scroll.
And just like Frodo wasn't being secretive enough, Sam, of course, not secretive at all.
No.
She saw him bring it in from the post. It's wrapped in silk and it's sealed, so obviously it's from the king, and she repeats their request, as most kids do. Can I see it? Can I see it? Can I see it? Please, 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 please.
And of course, Sam lets her in on the conspiracy, right? But only on the condition that she not tell the other kids. He's going to tell them in his own time. And that's when we get the news that we knew was coming because we read the first version of the epilogue last week. The king is coming.
Love it. Same scenario, but not at Bag End. To the bridge, he heads up there with his restored house at Númenor and is inviting everybody, and I love this part, inviting everybody by name.
That's right. Now, interestingly, he mentions that Aragorn has come up north once before when Elanor was a mite, right, when she was little.
Yes.
But there's no record anywhere in any of Tolkien's writings of any journey north before the one that Elisar takes in this year. So, I don't know. Don't know what to make of that.
There's so much that could be done and talked about in Tolkien at the what ifs. It's almost too much.
Well, I think it's one of those things where eventually Tolkien would have been like, nah, I'm gonna fix that part. You know, I mean, like
probably
little bits and pieces. He was like, no, Aragorn hasn't come up here, since his coronation.
We also got a little parallel, same visuals, the scroll in the 2 columns with the silver letters on black. Elanor can read the rest Westron, but not the Elvish.
That's right. I mean, could you? I don't know. What are your Tengwar skills up to? Are they?
I mean, I'll save that for the experts that I use, but I know that Daro is stop, and that's the equivalent of that. One day I will figure out how to translate. Did you know Viggo Mortensen broke 2 of his toes when he kicked that helmet?
That's hilarious.
Into Elvish.
Hilarious.
It's a lot. It's a lot. We're working on it.
So as before, Sam goes through the list of names in Elvish as well. And a couple of names have changed in the Elvish. We're not going to go into that much detail. Dawn, if you could pick up the next section of the reading. Actually, I think it's the last section of the story itself. It's a fairly lengthy read.
But it says the 2nd of April. Only a week today. When shall we start? We ought to be getting ready. What shall we wear? You must ask Mother Rose about all that, said Sam. But we have been getting ready. We had a warning of this a long time ago, and we've said naught about it, only because we didn't want you all to lose your sleep for nights. Not just yet. You have all got to look your best and beautifulest. You will all have beautiful clothes, and we shall drive in a coach. Shall I make 3 curtsies, or only 1? Said Elanor. 1 will do. 1 each for the king and the queen, said Sam. For though it doesn't say so in the letter, Eleanorella, I think the queen will be there. And when you've seen her, my dear, you'll know what a lady of the elves looks like, save that none are so beautiful. And there's more to it even than that. For I shall be surprised if the king doesn't bid us to his great house by Lake Evendom. And there will be Eladon and Elro here, who still live in Rivendell. And with them will be the elves, Eleanorella, and they will sing by the water in the twilight. That is why I said you might see them sooner than you guessed. Elanor said nothing, but stood looking at the fire, and her eyes shone like stars. At last she sighed and stirred. How long shall we stay? She asked. I suppose we shall have to come back. Yes, and we shall want to, in a way, said Sam. But we might stay until hay harvest, when I must be back here. Good night, Eleanorella. Sleep now till the sun rises. You'll have no need of dreams. Good night, Sam, Dad. And don't work any more, for I know what your chapter should be. Write down our talk together, but not tonight. She kissed him and passed out of the room, and it seemed to Sam that the fire burned low at her going. The stars were shining in a clear, dark sky. It was the 2nd day of the bright and cloudless spell that came every year to the Shire towards the end of March, and was every year welcomed and praised as something surprising for the season. All the children were in bed. It was late, but here and there lights were still glimmering in Hobbiton, and in houses dotted about the night-folded countryside. Master Samwise stood at the door and looked away eastward. He drew Mistress Rose to him and set his arm about her. March the 25th, he said. This day 17 years ago, Rosewife. I didn't think I should ever see thee again, but I kept on hoping. I never hoped at all, Sam, she said, not until that very day. And then suddenly I did. About noon it was, and I felt so glad that I began singing. And Mother said, Quiet, lass, there's ruffians about. And I said, Let them come, their time will soon be over. Sam's coming back. And you came. I did, said Sam, to the most belovedest place in all the world, to my rose and my garden. They went in, and Sam shut the door. But even as he did so, he heard suddenly, deep and unstilled, the sigh and murmur of the sea upon the shores of Middle-earth.
Thank you, Don.
Oh, I have goosebumps.
I know. It's such a passage.
Oh, my God.
Going back to the beginning of that, though, Elanor thinks highly of her father, whom she calls Samwise Dad Dearest here. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the part that we read, but yeah, fantastic little thing. And we get a reminder of the change date in the part we skipped.
Mm-hmm.
The king will arrive on April 2nd, 1 week from today, which makes today March 25th as before.
Yep, similar detail. We've known for a while you'll look beautiful in new clothes, and we'll take a coach, but in addition of Elanor asking how she should greet the king.
I love that bit about beautifulest, right? You've all got to look your best and beautifulest. I don't think I caught that until I heard you reading it, because Sam makes these words up, right? I mean, there is no such word as beautifulest, but it reminds me of the moment where he is trying to come up with Eleanor's name. Do you remember what he says? He's talking about the gaffer's words, don't come up with a super long name, right? Make it short and you want it to cut it short. Mm-hmm. Then, if I remember correctly, he says, but if it's to be a flower name, then I don't trouble about the length. It must be a beautiful flower, because you see, I think she is very beautiful and is going to be beautifuler still. Beautifuler still. I love that phrase. And it just fits that Sam is saying you need to look your beautifulest. It's just, it's a Sam-ism, and it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
But going on with like you said, Elanor asks how should she greet the king, and he's like, just a curtsy each for the king and queen, and that's because Sam thinks Arwen's going to be there, even though it's not mentioned in the letter.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I feel like Aragorn doesn't go too many places without Arwen.
Especially that long of a journey. Yeah.
Yeah, especially then. And Sam goes on to speak, of Arwen's beauty, and then the part about the lake house that we've all talked about before for that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But we do get more new bits, right? We get the fact that Elladan and Elrohir, Elrond's sons, who have remained so far, but just as a reminder, whose eventual fate we do not know for sure, will be there. Not to mention more elves, of course, including ones who might sing.
Yeah, singing elves. And of course, much like I would be, Elanor is thrilled and then wonders, how long are we going to stay? Because I want to hear them singing every night. But it's the same in the last version, till the hay harvest. That's with the great line, Elanor asking, as though she's reluctant, I suppose we shall have to come back. Like, do we really have to go? And why would anyone ever want to leave the place? With
Seriously, exactly. But Sam says that not only will we have to come back, we shall want to in a way. Now, he doesn't elaborate what he means by that, so we will. We'll want to because it's the right thing to do. We will love being with the elves, but we will know that there's a time that it isn't for us to be with them anymore. Do you think that's what he's saying here? What?
I get the sense that this is sort of a Frodo will know when his time has come to leave. We have saved the Shire. It has been saved. In that same way, I'm seeing this as we will spend time with friends, but then we will part, just like we did after after we destroyed the ring, and after we stayed in Bree, and after we stayed in Rivendell and Lothlorien. There is a time for everything. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there really is.
Yeah. Love it. And then they say goodnight, and Elanor gives Sam one last little piece of advice, which I love as a plot device for this. The chapter that he's to write in the Red Book should be the talk between the two of them that they just had.
I love that. That is fantastic and is a great way of incorporating it. I actually want to go back to that article by Duplessis here. She goes back to the Q&A part that we talked about at the beginning of this episode, points out that after Sam concludes that it will have to be revised before going into the book, having nevertheless delivered all of its information to the epilogue reader, Elanor pleads with him, don't write any more tonight. Talk to me, Sam Dad, which we talked about earlier. She goes on, Sam's conversation with his elven fair daughter focuses appropriately on the elves and on specific sorrows, seemingly those with which she is most likely to relate, like the sorrow of Arwen being parted from Elrond. But then she references that same bit from Verlin Flieger that we mentioned earlier, and she says, Tolkien's grappling with Sam's authorship, mentioned by Flieger, is revealed in one additional detail. Elanor recommends that his chapter should be their talk together, thus accounting for the presence of the intimate scene in the book purportedly written by Sam. Let's talk about that a little bit. This idea that the frame narrative, Elanor suggesting that Sam puts it in the book, that would be a way to possibly justify it actually being in the book.
Yeah.
It's almost as though Tolkien is foreseeing the trouble that he'll have incorporating this Sam's authorship into the frame narrative. And so he solves it possibly by having Elanor make the suggestion herself. What do you think?
This is one of those things that I see Tolkien, the author, shine through so well.
Yeah.
Very similar to but because the events of The Hobbit have already been discussed in my other book, it is not yet here described.
Right.
I don't want to go back and I don't want to do this. So this, to me, seems as though Tolkien is saying, look, I've already written something like this. I have this version and I think it's the one I'm going to go with. Just let me come up with a narrative way to justify it. And I love it. I think it works.
Yeah,
I think it works.
This would have been an interesting way. If you're going to do it, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to Sam's talk with Rose, I don't want to miss the observation that to Sam, when Elanor left the room, it seemed that the fire burned low. That clearly, Elanor is something special. And, her mere departure from her room makes the light go dim a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe even if it is a metaphor, it's one of those things that seem, my spirit is darker now.
Yeah. It's that memory of elven grace, right? We go back to that. And it's like, when an elf leaves the room, it's going to feel a little less bright. Yeah.
It absolutely is. But so we get outside now where it is darker. The stars feature yet again in that clear sky with the cloudless spell that comes to the Shire in late March.
And we get virtually the same conversation between Sam and Rose about March 25th and hope, but without the line that he gave us in the manuscript about being whole.
And I love that part. And going back to Duplessis' article, she points out The first version of the epilogue echoes this language of wholeness in Sam's exchange with Rosie. In Rose, Sam is made whole. In his children, he has had a lot of treasures, as he says to Elanor over the course of their conversation. What Tolkien called the rustic love of Sam and Rosie is not elaborated on per se, but it does point to the larger truth about what marriage does and can do for those involved. In Rose, Sam finds the consolation and healing that Frodo must seek beyond the sea.
So Frodo just needed to get married? I mean, no.
It's not for everybody, but
No.
this is definitely one of those instances where drawing that kind of parallel is so crucial because, it's not lost on me as a Tolkien content creator. These are beloved characters, and we want to know what happens afterwards.
Absolutely.
And to a lot of people, they don't subscribe to sort of John Green's thought process of once the story is written, it's no longer in my head, it's everybody's. I think Tolkien very much had expectations of here's likely what would have happened next. And we get that sort of parallel here.
I love this. Sam finds the consolation and healing that Frodo obviously has to seek in Valinor and the Undying Lands. Because, of course, you read on fairy stories, you understand what Tolkien means by consolation, the consolation of the happy ending, and you think about escape, recovery, and consolation. It's huge. And I really thought, first of all, it's a great quote, and I'm glad you brought it in here. It's kind of a bummer that we didn't have this article when we prepped and recorded last week's episode, because this really fits there, because she's talking about that first version where Sam does include the line about being made whole, but I felt like it needed to come in here somewhere. I mean, there's just no way we could avoid that. It's a great conversation. And then we get that final line, the one that Christopher says is really how Tolkien wanted to end the story, about the sigh and murmur of the sea on the shores of Middle-earth. And that just was there in the one we talked about last week, in the manuscript there, and now, of course, here in the typescript. So it definitely would have been the way the story ended.
Yeah, man. And it's curious to think of a different ending to The Lord of the Rings other than "Well, I'm Back." But
I know.
This definitely it feels close enough that I think if he had included it, this would have been a nice note to end on at the very least.
I think so.
Yeah. But coming back to the inclusion of this moment with Sam and Rosie, we're brought back to letter 131, the idea that this relationship is so crucial to understanding Sam, and yet it is nowhere elaborated.
Yeah, except for here. So between these two episodes, not only did I come across that essay from Duplessis, I also came across an essay by Nicholas Byrne. Now, the essay is titled, "You Have Grown Very Much, The Scouring of the Shire and the Novelistic Aspects of The Lord of the Rings." Really, really wish I'd found it when we were covering Scouring at the end of last season. It would have brought a lot of light to that. And the vast majority of the article is on the Scouring. But in it, he talks about this nowhere elaborated line in letter 131. Byrne writes, "The nowhere elaborated is key. Why, in a sprawling, teeming saga replete with details of Dunlin and Lasarnoch, Archet and Aglaron, would an author nowhere elaborate something he says is essential to the understanding of a character that he says is his hero?" Obviously, Tolkien thought about having a more expanded role for Rosie, explicitly in the shelved epilogue, talking about what we're doing here, but perhaps elsewhere in possible reveries by Sam during his Mordor travails, and decided this would distort the shape of the book. Interesting take.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but
I kind of do.
I get it. We can discuss this a little bit later. His position, though, seems to be that Tolkien was sure that this sort of very traditional novel ending would be inconsistent with the tone of the rest of the book. I do agree with him there a little bit. But as Byrne argues, this convergence of domesticity, middle-class qualities, and psychological depth is nowhere elaborated, speaks to Tolkien's reluctance to have these novelistic aspects burst his epic and romantic frame. That part I do agree with.
I totally agree with. Yeah. I mean, it completely makes sense. It does change the tone to turn this into, a domestic novel about marriage and children. Very much changes the tone, turns it into more of a novelistic experience than an epic experience.
Yeah.
Even though those things, marriage and family and the domestic life, are exactly why the epic was undertaken, right? To protect the Shire,
Yes. And I think to an extent, we get the Shire, we save the Shire, but that is in the beginning of the book. The stakes are already set up.
Yes.
So by the end, they have already saved the Shire now twice, once from Saruman, once from Sauron. And now we have this. I don't necessarily think we need that reminder again, unless you cut Scouring of the Shire,
which
completely.
You can't do that.
Which you can't, because it's
everything.
That's
still my biggest gripe. I mean, I know that there's no way in the world Jackson could have added the Scouring. People would have skewered him in cinema. You just could not do that. I do wish that there had been a fourth film just on the Scouring. You could easily do a 2-hour film on the Scouring, and it would have been fantastic, and I would have absolutely paid top dollar to go see it. But
there's a world that exists where just the Scouring of the Shire is a chapter, and we get like the big battle and Lobelia, Sackville Baggins, and
chapter. It's a whole movie. It's 2 hours of just the Scouring. An entire fourth movie. If
anybody needs movie ideas and you work for Warner Brothers Animation,
there you go.
Or you want to do a short series on whatever streaming service,
or maybe after Rings of Power, Amazon could do a TV series on the Scouring of the Shire.
We could do a lot there.
You could do a full season of just sort of the build up with Saruman, manipulating from afar, and then season 2 could be, the battles and all of this, and season 3 could be the defeat of Saruman. Oh man,
you're giving me more ideas, Alan, for writing these things and making these animated series, and
Amazon has the rights because they bought the rights to the Lord of the Rings and the appendices. They could do it, but but
I want to do it. Let's crowdfund.
Too expensive to crowdfund, I suspect.
You know what's not expensive, though?
No, what's that?
Listening to this podcast as you read the next portion.
All right. Good one. I'm impressed.
Thanks.
All right. Now, in this bit, we're after the end of the story. So basically, I am reading little bits and pieces. I'm going to read the translation of the King's Letter, or one of the translations of the King's Letter. I'm going to read the last paragraph from letter 131, and then some more of Christopher's notes. Aragorn Strider the Elfstone, King of Gondor and Lord of the Westlands, will approach the Bridge of Branduin on the 8th day of spring, or in the Shire reckoning, the 2nd day of April. And he desires to greet there all his friends. In especial, he desires to see Master Samwise, Mayor of the Shire, and Rose his wife, and Elanor, Rose, Goldilocks, and Daisy his daughters, and Frodo, Merry, Pippin, and Hamfast his sons. To Samwise and Rose, the king's greeting from Minas Tirith, the 31st day of the stirring, being the 23rd of February in their reckoning. Okay, before I go on to letter number 131, clearly he hadn't gotten word of Primrose yet.
Mm-hmm.
But, she is fairly new. And also, 31st day of the stirring, so the 23rd of February, that's how long it took for this letter to get there. Not that long, frankly, because it had arrived, a couple weeks before? So it would have arrived in the middle of March, maybe 2.5 weeks to get there. Pretty quick, all things considered. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Letter 131, and I'm not going to read the entire portion that Christopher has quoted in the chapter. Instead, I'm just going to go to the end where Tolkien is explaining to Milton Waldman the end of the story. He writes, and this is again from letter 131. Then he, Sam, rides home. His wife welcomes him to the firelight and his first child, and he says simply, "Well, I've come back." There is a brief epilogue in which we see Sam among his children, a glance at his love for Elanor, the elvish name of a flower in Lorien, his eldest, who by a strange gift has the looks and beauty of an elven maid. In her, all his love and longing for elves is resolved and satisfied. He is busy, contented, many times mayor of the Shire, and struggling to finish off the Red Book, begun by Bilbo and nearly completed by Frodo, in which all the events told in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are recorded. The whole ends with Sam and his wife standing outside Bag End as the children are asleep, looking at the stars in the cool spring sky. Sam tells his wife of his bliss and content and goes in, but as he closes the door, he hears the sighing of the sea on the shores of the world. I love that. So he's very much explaining that to Milton Waldman, and as we'll talk about later, he says we see Sam among his children. So this is actually before the typescript version.
Yep.
So he's talking about the stuff that he wrote originally. Now, he was persuaded by others to omit the epilogue from The Lord of the Rings, Christopher explains, and he cites the letter to Naomi Mitchison of 25th of April, 1954, which is in the letters volume as number 144. There, Tolkien wrote to her, "Hobbit children were delightful, but I am afraid that the only glimpses of them in this book are found at the beginning of volume 1. An epilogue giving a further glimpse, though of a rather exceptional family, has been so universally condemned that I shall not insert it. One must stop somewhere." Christopher continues, He seems both to have accepted and to have regretted that decision. On the 24th of October, 1955, a few days after the publication of The Return of the King, he wrote to Catherine Ferrer, letter number 173, I still feel the picture incomplete without something on Samwise and Elanor, but I could not devise anything that would not have destroyed the ending, more than the hints, possibly sufficient, in the appendices. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
He still felt the picture incomplete. I can see why. After reading this, I can see why.
The man's work was never done, and which is so bizarre because after this, Christopher describes the king's letter facsimiles written in Tengwar.
Yeah,
and you just
gorgeous.
think about the effort that was put into this. Like Tolkien.
Look at the pages. I mean, if you've got Sauron defeated, they're reproduced in the book. And then, of course, as we talked about last week, if you have the recent special edition of Lord of the Rings, you'll have a reproduction with silver text on black paper. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a little tricky to do on here. As Christopher references the facsimiles. Yeah, they're reproduced in the volume itself. Also, this is not a video podcast, and even if it were, my Tengwar is certainly not up to those sorts of skills.
Now, next, Christopher points us to letter 131 to Milton Waldman, as we talked about. Keep in mind, this letter was written in 1951, and like we mentioned, that means he's talking about the first version of the epilogue that we talked about last week, right? Because he summarizes the whole tale, and we read that bit about Sam riding home in the final line.
Mm-hmm. Also, something interesting to point out, Tolkien misquotes himself here on one of his most famous lines, quoting Sam as saying, well, I've come back. It's also interesting that Tolkien misquotes himself here in one of his most famous lines, quoting Sam as saying, well, I've come back. Christopher notes that in all of the texts from the earliest draft, Sam says, well, I'm back. He also, Riley notes, well, I've come back does not mean the same thing. So thank you, Christopher. That's
an
important.
Excellent example of some quality pedantry right there. He's dead right? I mean, well, I've come back is different from well, I'm back. And I am glad he stuck with well, I'm back. It's interesting that he didn't remember exactly how he'd ended it. But then we get to the decision not to publish the epilogue. And Christopher says that his father was persuaded by others to cut the epilogue, references that letter to Naomi Mitchison. By that point, he'd have written the transcript copy that we looked at today. But he tells her the epilogue has been so universally condemned that I shall not insert it. One must stop somewhere. I want to talk about two different things. First, universally condemned. What do you think?
I think Tolkien is being slightly more melodramatic, and by universally, I think he means the people that he asked whether or not he should put in or have said something about it. I definitely get the sense that I'm going to introduce your audience to perhaps a new phrase for them, doing the most. It's a more modern phrase here in 2024 where someone is doing way more than is required of the situation. And I think, for me at least, personally, I see this epilogue as something that is cool to look back on in hindsight, but it's a little bit like, oh, you're doing even more now, John. There's extra stuff on top of the extra stuff on top of the other extra stuff.
Thank goodness there is.
So
I hear what you mean. Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have a podcast, but
that's fair.
I digress.
Yeah.
I feel as though universally condemned, bit melodramatic there for Tolkien.
I mean, obviously it's not universally as in the entirety of the universe, but I do suspect that it was universal among the people that he spoke to. And I think, because we do get some hints from this, that the Inklings, every one of them said, no, you shouldn't include that. And, he took some of their opinions more seriously than others, right? He did take Lewis's opinion a lot more seriously than some of the others. But if that's the person who said, no, you shouldn't include it, then I think that would explain one of the reasons why he didn't. I imagine also his publisher was like, yeah, I don't know. You sure you want to include this? I mean, I'm sure Tolkien could have pushed if he really wanted to, but he just couldn't get the support for including
couldn't do
it.
it.
There's nobody on his side saying, yeah, you really need to include this. And that leads us then to the next thing, because you talked about doing the most. One must stop somewhere. You could keep on writing forever and ever, and Tolkien virtually did. I mean, you look at the history of Middle Earth and you realize that the Lord of the Rings is the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, he just never stopped. But one must stop somewhere. Even if he's not going to stop writing, and he didn't because the epilogue is here, many versions of it, one must declare it finished and release it, even if you're not done with it.
Yeah.
Right.
This goes back to the phrase, an artist's work is never done. You have to stop somewhere. Eventually the painting doesn't need any more paint on it. Eventually there are the right words in the right order to get that book. But again, this is like a Brandon Sanderson, if you want to have a modern day comparison, or truly Alexander Hamilton. You write as though you're running out of time. You write as if this story is in you and it bothers you that it's in your head and not on paper. So I take it as, even though you have to stop somewhere, the journey doesn't end here, right? This book is just one of many. Lord of the Rings is just another path. There's also the Silmarillion and Leaf by Niggle and Adventures of Tom Bombadil. And it just seems to me that, like, yes, Tolkien could stop writing. He didn't, and he's not going to.
No.
Back then.
Well, you mentioned Leaf by Niggle, and I was already thinking of this because of the way you phrased this about finishing, Do you remember in Leaf by Niggle, before he went on his journey, right? He was not finished with the painting, and I'm going to pull up the text right now. "There now," said the inspector. "You'll have to go, but it's a bad way to start on your journey, leaving your jobs undone. Still, we can at least make some use of this canvas now." "Oh dear," said poor Niggle, beginning to weep, "and it's not even finished." "Not finished," said the driver. "Well, it's finished with, as far as you're concerned, at any rate. Come along." That moment, and then later it comes up again. This is much, much later. This is after he has kind of walked into the painting, right? He'd never before been able to walk into the distance without turning it into mere surrounding. And now here he is walking towards the forest. Niggle walked about, but he was not merely pottering. He was looking round carefully. The tree was finished, though not finished with. Just the other way about what it used to be, he thought. But in the forest, there were a number of inconclusive regions that still needed work and thought. Nothing needed altering any longer. Nothing was wrong as far as it had gone, but it needed continuing up to a definite point. Wow.
Up to a definite point is, I think, the best way to put it. Just up to a definite point. We're here. We've got it. We're done. It's over. And then we can keep talking about it.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, book has to go to the publisher.
I loved how it used to be that he was finished with it, even if it wasn't finished. And now it's finished, even if he's not finished with it.
Love that.
And that combined with this one must stop somewhere really does shed some light on it. Yeah, man.
Love it so much. And keep in mind, Christopher references another letter talking about his father's feelings on the decision. This is letter 173 to Catherine Farrer in October 1955, just after The Return of the King had been published. Tolkien writes, "I still feel the picture incomplete without something on Samwise and Elanor, but I could not devise anything that would not have destroyed the ending. More than the hints possibly sufficient in the appendices."
Right.
Destroyed the ending is a very harsh term, but
really
for Tolkien,
is. Yeah.
He's his own worst critic most times. So I feel as though it wouldn't have destroyed it. But as I've been saying this whole time,
the ending as it is kind of perfect. I mean, that's the way
it is. Oh, it absolutely
it
is.
might be the ideal ending of a story. It leaves just enough. It's like when we talked about last week, as much as I love reading the epilogue, I'm glad it wasn't in the published final version, because the ending as it is absolutely chef's kiss. Right? It is perfection. And to mess with that would be to destroy perfection. Maybe not destroy, but damage it, right? And so, yeah, from Tolkien's perspective, it would not, anything else would have destroyed the ending. But yeah, it's still so hard, because he wanted to explore this. Something on Samwise and Elanor is what he tells Catherine in that letter. It puts me in mind of what we talked about last week, the simple rustic love of Sam and Rosie being essential to the study of the chief hero's character. We're talking about two very important relationships here, the marriage relationship with Sam and Rosie and the father-daughter relationship with Sam and Elanor, that Tolkien sees as really central, very important, crucial, critical, whatever you want to call it, and yet wasn't able to really include either one.
And it is also interesting, though, that both of these feature women characters.
Yes.
It's his daughter, Elanor. It's not one of his sons, with whom he had many, that Sam is closest to.
Right.
We don't really get a lot of female characters discussed about in general. As people, myself included, have noted, we especially don't see a lot of women hobbits at all. We get Lobelia Sackville-Baggins.
Lobelia and Rose are about it.
Yeah, we get mention of Frodo's.
We get names, right.
Yeah, we get names, but nothing more than that. So, it's
Bilbo's mom, the famous Belladonna Took. But we don't get a lot on them. We just get some on Lobelia and a little bit on Rosie. Yeah, it would have been nice to see more with Rosie and to see this significantly long passage with Elanor, because Elanor really, it turns out, is important to the story. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Man, that was a lot of fun to go into. I like that line, though. He seems both to have accepted and to have regretted that decision.
Seems as though there was definitely a lot of love for ending it the way it did and a lot of desire for wanting more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, though, because I've heard Barliman say the same thing about the mailbag. He's both accepted it and regretted it.
Oh, and there
we go. Dawn, what does Barliman have for us tonight?
Oh, well, last week, top notch. I learned from the best. Last week, we had a question from Christopher S. asking why Tolkien chose not to include the epilogue, and second, what its inclusion would have done to the story. We only answered that second half, talking about our thoughts about how the story would have changed for the better or not had Tolkien included the epilogue in the published version. We intentionally avoided the first question.
That's right. I felt like we could only really talk about that after looking at the second version of the epilogue that would have been published had it been published, and then talking through some possible reasons, which I think came up tonight. So in tonight's mailbag, real briefly, since we're already kind of running long, that's precisely what we're going to do. We're going to talk about why we think Tolkien chose not to publish the epilogue. Dawn, you've seen a few different arguments. What are your thoughts? What do you think was Tolkien's rationale? Not your own rationale for not including the epilogue. What do you think his reasoning was?
To step inside the mind of the professor, I have to put myself in a tweed jacket with a smoky room, a mug of ale, and C.S. Lewis a few feet to my left. So I'll say this and only this. Truly, Clive, I do think the story ended quite well, but I want to keep writing. It almost feels as though
my goodness,
sorry, that was terrible.
No, it was gutsy. I got to say, I don't think of all the. I feel terrified when I do a Tom Shippey impression. I don't think I'd ever have the guts to try a Tolkien impression.
I'm not terribly good at it, but that's what your audience has come to expect of me. So I just lean into the bits.
That's our lean into the mediocrity, Don.
You got to. You've got to, man. If people expect greatness every time, I'm going to disappoint you.
That's true.
So here's my actual thoughts as it goes. I personally kind of understand where Tolkien is coming from to not include the epilogue.
Yeah.
It deviates significantly from the writing style of the whole Lord of the Rings. It is way more rustic, and you start at the beginning with the Shire, and it's rustic and it's great, and we get this sense of, all right, this is the land we're trying to save. Very similar to like how Rings of Power sets up, all right, these are the lands, these are the kingdoms, they're going to be in trouble in season 2, go. In that same way, it feels as though we don't necessarily need to come back to that rustic as much. We've had that camaraderie between Frodo and Sam. It is mentioned in this appendices style thing. And also keep in mind, the new shadow exists. So if we're thinking about, well, for those that maybe don't know, the new shadow is the 13 pages of a sequel following the story of Eldarion, Aragorn's son, as the threat of Mordor comes back to Minas Tirith. In that same way, I often think to myself, was Tolkien thinking about the new shadow when he said, no, I don't want the epilogue, that would put too many things set in stone? Or is there another story beyond this? You start with The Hobbit. He didn't expect to write The Lord of the Rings out of that.
No.
In that same vein, if you write The Lord of the Rings, do you expect something else to come out of that 20 years
later? He wanted
later?
the Silmarillion to come out of it, right? He wanted the Silmarillion to be published. Letter 131, let's not forget, is what he was writing to Milton Waldman, who represented another publisher, because he was because Allen and Unwin weren't going to publish the Silmarillion, and he wanted the Silmarillion published with the Lord of the Rings. So, he certainly wasn't done. It's a good point. I think my hunch, and I'm not going to try to have the gall to actually step in and say this is what Tolkien would have thought, but I do believe that there were a number of factors at play, and we've touched on all of them. I think some inkling influence. There's no doubt that he took their opinion seriously, and if they said, no, this wasn't a good idea, then he would seriously think twice about doing it. I think the challenges of composition, right, of authorial composition, like who wrote this, the idea of Sam writing it, proved to be a little too difficult. Like he would have had a very hard time incorporating this and having it feel like it's part of the same book rather than as a separate writing, a separate epilogue. And I think that played a role, like how much of the book was he going to have to rewrite as a result? But I think we've touched on so many possible reasons, the need to stop somewhere. I think he knows that. He might regret that that's true. He might not wish that that were so, but I think he understood that there is indeed a need to stop somewhere.
Yeah, so do all who live to see such times. But that is
Wow,
not for them to
Don.
decide.
Wow.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us for the rest of this outro for the Prancing Pony podcast.
Wow. Nicely
Thank you.
done.
Thank you.
As Don has intimated, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. But come back next week when we're joined by a few of our patrons for our 28th quarterly Questions After Nightfall. Man.
These are one of my favorite things to be a part of. Can't believe you've done 28, but well done. Alan and I also want to give a huge thank you to the members of Team PPP, the person that works hard on fixing all of my mistakes, editor Jordan Randalls, Barleyman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, and event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
That's right. Now, please take a minute to check out the prancingponypodcast.com. That's where you're going to find our show notes, our outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, our online storefront where you can get PPP merch, including the all-new chapter art from Megan that she did for books 5 and 6.
Huge fans of that artwork.
Gorgeous.
Right here.
Yeah.
You will also want to check out our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, after all, a podcast about books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you will find a link for it in our library. We do get a small amount of compensation when you make that purchase. We do thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. And we also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, June in Ireland, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, and Keith in Alabama.
There's also Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, and Joe in Maryland. Thank you all very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you, thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. You can subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcasting app.
That's right. Now, one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your reasons for not publishing the epilogue to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
And if you want your voice literally heard, well, all you have to do is send us audio of your questions. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your questions for us. Be sure, though, to still email them to the Barleyman.
That's right. Even though the Barliman has been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We will try to get back to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Well, I've come back.